In 2007, high school student Jamie Decker here in Charlotte visited Discovery Place Science to see body worlds created by Dr. Gunther von Hagens. And that awe-inspiring experience with anatomy changed the trajectory of her life. Today, Jamie has the distinction of being the only American who has trained extensively under von Hagens at his Plastination company in Germany. And her own company, Experience Anatomy, is poised to revolutionize health and life science education. This is supremely creative work, and she's an amazing person. So I'm so glad to introduce you to her, my fellow creative Charlotteans, here to speak to us on the global theme of preserve. Please welcome Charlotte's own Jamie Decker to the stage. Come on up, Jamie.
Hey, everybody. Can you guys hear me okay? No? Is that better? There we go. So first of all, thank you to Matt and Tim for giving me the opportunity to do this, and a special thank you to Ortho Carolina also for introducing me to this community in the first place. When I first heard that the topic of this theme was preserve, there we go. Is that working, guys? Yep. Sorry. I kind of laughed because it was so obvious. I spend my days surrounded by products of preservation, and I've dedicated the last 10 years to learning different processes of preservation. Do you all have your cell phones on you? Pull them out and open up your photos, because you all do this every single day. You take a picture of your Taco Tuesday lunch. You take a picture of your child's every emotion. Maybe you screen grabbed a conversation with somebody that was really funny or really annoying so you could share it with somebody and say, oh my God, can you believe that they said this or that? You go to the salon and get your roots dyed, get your nails done. Or maybe you join a bowling league with your dad friends. What we're trying to do is preserve. You're preserving a memory, a conversation, your sanity, your youth. What I do is a different type of preservation, but the way that I came about it is kind of unique. I credit this to my parents for an interesting upbringing. I was homeschooled with my older brother and sister, and we all know homeschool kids are kind of weird. I did go to public school from grades 4 through 8, and during that time, I ended up missing 180 days of school, which is an entire school year. At that age, it wasn't that big of a deal, and I made good grades, so nobody said anything. But once I got to high school, and I went to Independence High School in Mint Hill, any green and gold, is that what it is here? No. I wouldn't know either because I dropped out. After 2 months of high school, I'd missed 10 days, and though I was a straight A honor student, they told me that I was going to fail. Instead of saying, okay, well, I'll try again next year, I dropped out and went back to the homeschool route that I was familiar with. I established my own high school called Tenacious High, and I took all 4 years of tests in 1 year and graduated at age 15. At that point, I started working full-time, and I have to shout out Nikki Eason, because me and Nikki worked together when I was 17 years old. I was working full-time at a marketing firm. So I got a lot of cool experiences in my high school years that gave me opportunities that other kids my age weren't having. Lucky for me, Body Worlds came through Charlotte at Discovery Place when I was about 18 years old. I went to the exhibition with my sister, and I was like, oh my God, who does this? Where's it done? Where do the bodies come from? How do they preserve them? Where do they take them? How can I do this? And nobody could answer my questions. Even when I looked online and searched plastination, not much came up other than Gunther von Hagens. There's no degree in plastination. There's nowhere you can study it. So I continued to look online over and over, trying to figure out how to do this. And I ended up in business school in college, which was really boring. And luckily, I read this book, Stiff, by Mary Roach. One person's read it? Anybody else? Oh, okay. few people. If you haven't read it, please do. It's all about the curious lives of human cadavers. Even if you're not into dead people, it's a really good read. I was reading this book in college and probably avoiding school or not going to school because that's my habit. And there's a whole chapter on beating heart cadavers. If you're not familiar with that, this is what happens when somebody is in a hospital setting and is declared brain dead. That's the definition of death. But you can keep somebody's heart beating mechanically to preserve their internal organs long enough for transplantation to save a life. Because your heart beating isn't what defines life. Your brain working is what defines life. So I was on the phone with my mom and telling her how much I hated school probably. And she's like, well, what is it that makes your heart beat? That's the exact question she asked me. And I was like, oh my God, heart's not beating is what gets me excited. Like dead people. I'm like really excited about this, but I don't know what to do about it. So again, there weren't any degrees in plastination, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I did the next best thing, and I switched majors really quickly to mortuary science and funeral services. So I went to a small tech college down in South Carolina. I was learning all kinds of stuff about grief and about counseling, about ethics, about mortuary law, about running a business, because let's face it, that's what the funeral industry is. It's an $11 billion industry. But what I was really interested was behind the scenes and the preservation process, how embalming is done, and how we could maybe do it better. Because embalming arterially with formaldehyde is a 100-year-old process. So there hasn't been any really good innovation in the world of preservation in a long time since Body Worlds. While I was in college, I stumbled upon a group called the International Society of Plastination, and they were holding their 11th interim conference in Toledo, Ohio in 2010 or 2011. I wrote sponsorship letters and begged people for money and wrote the registration people and asked them to let me in for a student rate, even though that wasn't a thing. And they're like, yeah, if you can get here, we'll let you in. And the day before the conference, I didn't raise enough money. So I went to my older brother, and I'm like crying. I'm like, I really want to see these dead bodies, and I want to learn how to do this, and this is finally like the closest thing to it. And he's like, well, why didn't you just say so? Here's the money. So I was like, all this work that I put into, and I failed. But when I think back on it, that's what makes it so unique, is that I tried and tried and tried, and that's the only way you get better at something. So I hopped in my car and drove to the beautiful Toledo, Ohio, and ended up at a conference with 63 participants from 23 different countries. I was probably the youngest person there. Sorry, I'm trying to get the clicker to work. Steve, any help? There we go. I'm flying through them. So you can see I was surrounded by science nerds and dead body parts, and I was in heaven. And I stuck out like a sore thumb, and I got asked over and over, what lab or university you're from? And I was like, North Carolina. And I met all these people from all over the world, but there weren't really very many people doing it here. And much to my surprise, in the crowd of people, I finally saw this old man with a hat on, and I was like, oh my God, I'm pretty sure that's Gunther von Hagens. He hadn't been to an interim conference since 1983. That was before I was born, if you can't tell. And so I slid my way next to von Hagens, as you can see, and tried to be beside him during these workshops and linger around and listen to what was going on. And finally, towards the end of the 4-day series, I walked up to him and I was like, can I come to Germany and learn this? And he said, yeah. And I was like, shit, he doesn't speak good English. So I was like, okay, slower. Can I come to Germany and learn how to do this? And again, he was like, yeah, here's a card. And I was like, okay. So for the next couple weeks, I wrote to them, explaining to them all my great experience in embalming that I had in my associate's degree from Piedmont Tech, and how I really was interested in plastination, and I wanted to come there and learn it. And they said, okay. And I was like, for real? And I was waiting to hear back and waiting to hear back because, let's be honest, I didn't have any other prospect at the time. I didn't want to work in a funeral home. The only reason I got that degree to begin with is because I loved plastination. So you could call it fate or serendipity or whatever, just a coincidence. On the day I graduated, I was driving home from graduation. It's like a 3-hour drive from Greenwood, South Carolina, with my dad, and I get really car sick, so I said to him, "Let me drive." "You can't drive, Dad." And in my lap, my phone buzzed, and I looked down, and it was an email from Germany, and I'm like, "Dad, read it. Read it out loud, or I'm going to pull over and read it." And I don't know if you can read it, but it basically says, "Hey, Jamie, thanks for your interest. We want to invite you to Germany. We're going to pay you the highest stipend we can pay for someone to live in Germany. Gunther von Hagen sends you his best wishes, and don't worry about your lack of experience. We will take good care of you." And so the story began. 2 months later, I packed my bags and moved to Germany. And everybody was like, "Well, where are you going to live?" I was like, "I don't know." Like, "What are you going to be doing?" "I don't know." They're like, "So this crazy German doctor invited you to come work in his death factory, and you're going to be cutting up human bodies. And they're promising you a place to live, and they're going to pay you?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's about all I know. You know as much as I do right now." And what's the movie, Taken? Everyone's like, "Oh, this is a horror story ready to happen." But I was like, "No, I made it. I'm going." So I moved to Germany, and literally like the day I stepped foot in, they took me into the Plastination Factory, where I learned step by step from the start to finish how the plastination works. I was working alongside multidisciplinary specialists from all over the world, one-on-one, day in and day out. There's some photos you can see from behind the scenes. This is a giraffe, before and after. Positioning human body. Positioning an African elephant, I think, is next. Hopefully I don't scroll through it too fast. That one's awesome. The infamous man riding the horse, which you may have seen in an exhibition. When I was there, because I was one of the only people who could speak good English, anytime they had English-speaking people visiting, they were like, "Oh, Jamie, you're going to run this workshop." So I was like, okay. So I would run workshops for students that would come visit for a week to learn anatomy, dissection, plastination. This is a group from University of Wisconsin, Green Bay. I would spend my days dissecting any part of the body that they gave me. This hand is one of my favorites. If you came by our booth, you've seen a similar hand that we have. Sorry, it's a little glitchy, guys. This is just kind of a photo journey from behind the scenes of Body Worlds. I loved every minute of it. This is the greatest thing I've ever done in my life. And I can't stay away from it. Like, I've been doing this for 10 years, and I can't stay away from it. So I was traveling back and forth from Germany because of the way the visas work. You can't stay for more than 3 months in any 6-month period. So I would travel back and forth. And on one of my trips home, I met a professor at Eastern Virginia Medical School, where they have a very small plastination lab there. And their Diener, which is a German word for caretaker of the dead, was retiring after 35 years or so of running their cadaver lab. So they were kind of in a position where they needed to hire somebody who knew some plastination and who knew how to take care of dead bodies. So they asked me if I wanted the position. And as much as I wanted to stay in Germany, being 23 years old and turning down an opportunity to work in a medical university was kind of stupid. So I took the opportunity, and I ran their gross anatomy lab for a couple years. But again, I couldn't stay away from Germany, so I created a program for medical students to travel back to Germany with me, because then the college paid me to go too. And I ran med students through special dissection programs that it's still running today at Eastern Virginia Medical School. After being in Virginia, is anybody here from Norfolk? Oh, sorry. I really don't love Norfolk, Hampton Roads, Tidewater community. And luckily, my husband got his dream job back in Charlotte at the Charlotte Fire Department. So that brought us back to Charlotte, but unfortunately, we are the largest city in the nation that doesn't have a medical university. Not for long, but currently, we still don't have a medical university. So I was pretty bummed because there were no cadaver labs here. And I was kind of giving up a lot of what I had worked for in order for him to take on his dream job. So I took a position teaching at CPCC. CP people here? Yay! So I was teaching in the medical careers department, teaching anatomy and physiology and medical terminology. And while I was there, I realized that it's really hard to teach a 3D subject with 2D subject matter. Trying to teach anatomy with a textbook and a lecture is boring and hard and not the best way to do it. So I tried to get CPCC to spend tens of thousands of dollars on plastinated specimens that we could source from Body Worlds, but their funding got cut. Same old story at every single community college and tech school around. So Body Worlds came back to Discovery Place in 2015, 2016, if any of you went to that one. And at that time, I happened to know the VP of exhibitions at Discovery Place, and she contacted me and said, hey, can we hire you as a specialist while Body Worlds is here? Because last time we couldn't answer any questions. And I was like, I know. You led me on like a 5-year journey to figure this stuff out because you guys didn't have the answers or anything. So they had me come in and train their entire staff and run tours through the exhibition when specialized groups would come through. And that's when it really clicked for me, when people coming from colleges said, oh my gosh, it's amazing that this cohort of students gets to experience this while they're taking neurobiology or anatomy or whatever. But it sucks because my next cohort won't, because Body Worlds is going to be here for 3 to 6 months, and that's it. And they're probably never going to come back to Charlotte. So I was like, well, I guess the only thing for me to do is create this again. So I started my own company in October of 2016 called Experience Anatomy, where I source body parts from the creators of Body Worlds, and I have exclusivity from them to rent these out to colleges so that they're not cost prohibitive. We create content around them to make them relevant, and we're using them at all levels. So not only are we training physicians who are practicing surgery, but we're also doing art, figure drawing, we're doing yoga classes, we're doing community events so that we can create access to something that we're all carrying around with us every day, but you probably don't know much about. All right? Thanks. So if you didn't get a chance earlier to come by and hold the brain, you should definitely do that before you leave. But again, we're based in Charlotte, so we would love to collaborate or find out if people have ideas. For the next 2 months, May and June, we will be at Discovery Place for their Science on the Rocks event, which is really fun, so you can come hold brains and ask questions. How are we doing on time? Did I go way over? Fine.
First of all, that was awesome. Thank you so much, Jamie Decker. Don't go anywhere. I think we created some time this morning, strangely enough. We're going to end at 10, so we got about 5 minutes for questions, and then 5 final minutes that we're going to do some final announcements. So let's do 5 minutes of questions from anyone that wants to know about plastination and this amazing woman's journey.
I read Stiff, and it is an amazing book. I loved it. When you say cost effective or it's not cost prohibitive, can you give us an idea of, like, if I wanted to rent a brain for a party, say, how much would it be for you to come with the brain and talk about it?
It's very customized, so our pricing is on a scale based on experience and based on people. But to give you an idea of cost to purchase the brain is about $10,000. I typically can run it by renting them at 1% of the cost is what my model usually is for things like that, if that answers your question.
Do you have any access to dead bodies in Charlotte that you can actually work with?
Yes. I've also established a not-for-profit body donation company. We're not accepting donations at this point because there's a lot of legality that goes into that, so we're waiting for non-exempt status right now. But the quick answer to that is yes.
I am excited and scared at the apparent interest in body parts, the market that exists in Charlotte for
Hot
body
market.
parts. Anybody else have a question? Oh, Sarah has a question.
So I'm interested in your non-traditional, non-linear path from I don't have a background, there's no path for me, but I know what I'm interested in. It kind of looks like this. I'm more interested in hearing more about, like, just a snort of how that, you kind of covered a little bit of it, but just some tips on finding your own path when the path isn't clear. when it maybe doesn't like go to college, get a degree, get a job, blah.
Yeah, that's the definition of my life. And I think so much of that is preserving curiosity. Because typically when you get put into this box, you get put into this path, and you get told if you want to be a teacher in college, you need a PhD. Well, I'm doing it with an associate's degree, so we can squash that already, right? But little things like that like ask why, talk to people, meet people. I think those are the little keys that make all the difference, and it's something that Nikki can probably protest to. When we were knocking on doors selling Bell South when I was 17 years old and I met people from all walks of life, it gives you a different perspective. So I think as much as maybe that doesn't sound like the direct answer to your question, the more you expose yourself to and the more you're open to learning, things will come to you that you put energy into. So regardless if it seems like it's a direct shot or not, if you have it in your brain and you bring it into every conversation and you're looking for it, chance favors the prepared mind.
Hey, I've got a question.
Yes.
Can you tell some stories of maybe people's reactions when they are interacting with a plastinized organ and how it gives them insight into their own bodies and maybe what they're doing to their own bodies?
Yeah, that's one of the unique things about plastination is that you can preserve anomalies and pathologies side by side with unique anatomy. And the unfortunate thing about learning anatomy in school is that you're getting a textbook anatomy that was written how many years ago that was based off of the normal, average, healthy, white male. And that's like none of us in here probably. So plastination gives exposure to what our community actually looks like on the inside and lets you compare those things side by side. And that's something that most people have never seen before. And again, you carry it around with you every day, so when people see a brain laying on the table and they're like, oh, gross, I don't want to touch it. I'm like, you're carrying it with you in your head. You're protecting it every day, but you don't want to know about it. Because if you learn a little bit more about your body, you can take care of your body better, right?
Maybe a final question, if there is one.
Nikki, when you were walking around with Jamie, you knew she was going to be a badass, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I learned some things from Jamie myself, so yeah.
And Jamie, when you were walking around with Nikki, you knew she was a badass, didn't you?
Hell yeah.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, one more time for Jamie Decker.